Greetings, everybody. We are back with another interview in our Show Some Love campaign. I'm Tina Brown, VP of Marketing and Communications with Giving Gap. And today we're so excited to sit down with Dr. Noelle Trent, who is the president and CEO of the Museum of African American History in Boston and Nantucket.
Well, thank you so much for having me. The mission of the museum is really to focus on telling and interpreting and preserving the stories of African Americans in Massachusetts, specifically the communities that we're located in, Boston and Nantucket, as well as the greater New England region. We specifically focus on the 19th century and before, so that early America colonial period, but we do dip our toes into the 20th century. And our overall purpose is to make sure that we connect that past with the present. We really believe in what James Baldwin says is that history is literally present in all that we do. And we want people, our visitors and supporters, to know and understand that and feel that in every experience that they have.
Fantastic. And so, Dr. Trent, can you talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges you have faced in the past, or even maybe in the current climate with going forward with your mission and vision?
Well, I think the challenge for every African American museum, especially those that are independently run, meaning that they are not part of a state, local, or federal government structure, is funding. We were institutions that were created out of grassroots campaigns. Our story is one where our founder, Sue Bailey Thurman, arrived in Boston in 1953 and with her husband, who was Howard Thurman, the Dean of Marsh Chapel at Boston University. And she was very interested in preserving Black historic sites and was researching Boston's early Black activist community as the civil rights movement is getting its legs. And she's noticing that there are all these markers to these other eras of American history, and particularly highlighting white men. There's a lot of statues of them on horses throughout Boston. And she wanted to know, well, where's the other story? What are the other experiences? Because we know this was a place that was the hub for abolition.
Mhm.
So she does her research and she begins to create a trail known as the Black Heritage Trail, where she documents the locations of Black abolitionist homes and places of activity. And on one of those trips that she took on Beacon Hill, she found this building that she thinks is the African Meeting House. But at the time, it was a Jewish synagogue, right?
Wow.
And so, I can imagine her being like, now, do I have this right? What's going
Yeah.
on here? And at one point in the later part of the 19th century, there was something like 25 synagogues on Beacon Hill. A lot of people don't know that story as well. So she goes in to the synagogue, talks to the congregation. They actually let her do some programming and exhibitions in the space. And
Wow.
when they leave the building in the 1970s, they sell it to the museum. And so that's how we develop our first physical space on Beacon Hill. And so our story, we're part of this early emergence of Black museums. A lot of people know the DuSable Museum in Chicago, Charles H. Wright Museum in Detroit. We are being founded around that same time, so the early 60s. As there's this wrestling with the civil rights movement, there's a group of people who realize the importance of preserving African American history. And so we're very honored and we take very seriously that we have this roots in this larger movement. So all of that to say is that for independently run African American museums, funding is absolutely critical. It is how we survive. It's not just those operating dollars. Doesn't go just to support people's salaries. The salary part's very important, but it supports the preservation of the building. I like to say historic buildings have historic building problems. I can walk in one day, everything's fine. I walk in another day and something's fallen down. It has nothing to do with anything anybody did wrong. It's just an old building, right?
Yep.
And so there's things like that. And then programs, because when we involve our partners and if we want to support other artists of color, their work isn't free, their labor isn't free. And so that helps us make sure that we compensate individuals as well. So it's a multi-layered approach, and those dollars really do go far. I think sometimes people think, well, I only have this much or I only have that much. And I promise you, every dollar down to the penny makes a difference for Black museums.
100%. And Dr. Trent, you just, oh my gosh, you laid out so many things so beautifully. First of all, what a rich history, right?
Yeah.
First to the museum of its start and its origin story. That's a lovely story. That's the kind of information we want to be able to share, right? Broad scale. But then you mentioned the thing that we hear from all of our independent nonprofits is this funding issue, right? The dollars don't create themselves. They have to come from somewhere. And we need people to donate. We need people to fund. We need people to partner and collaborate, which is what we're really trying to focus on with the Show Some Love campaign, is to be able to do some level of fundraising and driving folks, to your website, to your donation page, and whatever events you have coming on, which we'll get to in a second, just to help support this work that's happening in those communities. So thank you so much for that. You named several things, but I'd like to know during your tenure with the museum, Dr. Trent, what's maybe something you're most proud of? It could be a project or a particular campaign that you all rolled out. It could even be something currently that you're doing.
Well, I have to say it's pretty current because I've only been with the museum for about 19 months, so I'm still pretty new. And the thing I'm most proud of is our latest exhibition, Being Frederick Douglass. It is an AI hologram Frederick Douglass that you can interact with, and it uses artificial intelligence, so it's a closed data set. And what that means is, unlike ChatGPT, which is an open AI and it pulls from anywhere on the internet, we actually load the data that it pulls from. And so this one pulls from all three of Douglas's autobiographies and selected speeches. And so you can ask Douglas a question and he will answer you. And so it's got this great sort of natural learning mechanism that it has within it. You can tell us, your comprehension level so that he will respond to you in a way that's appropriate. So what I mean by that is that if someone's in the third grade, we can set it to a third grade comprehension level, and
Mhm.
he'll respond to the question in a way that's appropriate for a third grade.
Yeah.
And so that's really brilliant. That's cutting edge. What's exciting about this is that it's not a one and done situation for us. As we get more funding and support for this project, we can add more and more speeches into it so it flushes out Douglas's response. He can't respond to contemporary events, and that frustrates people sometimes. But we really didn't mean it for, people who were not going to read all of his works. I'm a Douglas scholar by training. So I love all of his works, but not everybody wants to go down the rabbit hole like
Yeah.
I do. And then for other people, they want the experiential learning. So they would much rather have a conversation with a historical figure.
Yeah.
And this gives people that opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. And I love, honestly, the fact that you all are controlling where they're pulling the resources from, like in terms of his responses, and that it's not just open and pulling from anywhere, right? It's based on his autobiographies and other relevant content, just to keep, I think keeping things in line with history is very important. And sometimes when you have like the open AI that's still sort of pulling from any resource, there could be some challenges with that. So I love the fact that you all are kind of controlling on the back end where it's pulling from for the
Yeah,
AI.
absolutely. And I think what's important is that museums are still really experimenting with technology. The public history field in general has always been a little dubious of anything new technologically. I remember when I was an undergrad and they started talking about migrating records over to digital, and everybody's like, now, how are we going to preserve the degradation? I mean, there were like very intense debates at conferences and in meetings about this, but because people are always concerned about the preservation of the materials and how it's interpreted. And I think this is just an evolution of that dialogue. I also think it's really important for African American museums to get in on this technological work now, that we don't wait for it to be done, because then that's when the bias is built into it. We have a great company that we're working with, Time Looper, that really treated us like a peer and wasn't trying to sell us the software. We came into it as joint collaborators in, well, this is how the software works. How do you guys feel like this would be work best for you? And that really and truly needs to be the path forward for historically underrepresented communities. When we're a culturally specific institution, you have a different set of things that you're considering as you're putting together this technology. And wouldn't it be great if more of us could afford to do it in the early phases of this technological development so that we could perhaps direct the ethics and protocols around it? And
Yes.
we feel that by doing it now, we begin to help contribute to that dialogue.
100%. 100%. I'm going to pivot slightly, Dr. Trent,
Mhm.
and just I want to hear your thoughts on what role does the community or just the average person that may see this interview, what role can they play in terms of helping the museum execute its mission?
Well, the community is absolutely paramount to the work that we do. Um, for our museum, especially, we would not exist without the community, without people speaking up when there were injustices against us as institutions, for our buildings, for people to advocate for us. And so there's so many, the community is so integral to this work. We are a small and scrappy staff, and I've got wonderful people around me. So community support is absolutely critical. So that can look as simple as bringing your friends and family to the museum, to attending one of our programs. And then once again, I got to go back to making a donation. And it could be as simple as donating 1 cup of coffee every month to the museum. I promise you that 1 cup of coffee will make a huge difference to the work that we're doing. And then to advocate for us in the different spheres. We are in a time when um, people are questioning the
Yes,
value of African American history. And it's one thing for me as a trained historian and experienced museum professional to get up and say, this is why it matters. But it also matters when the community says, this place matters. Let me tell you how it affected my life.
right.
I don't think people realize how much power they have as individuals around supporting the institutions that they care about.
100%. And that's what it's about is showing people the amount of power that they can have an impact, right? Just by,
Right.
you know, putting out a donation or maybe setting up a small recurring donation, which is obviously very helpful. Um, so, given that, what are a few things that we can look forward to from the museum that are coming up in terms of events or campaigns that you are rolling out for 2025?
Well, we have all sorts of surprises. I think this month, Black History Month, we're very excited about Black History Month, although we do Black History 365, but we do
Yeah.
operate under the premise of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, that this wasn't a time the only time that you talk about African American history. It is the time of the year that you pause and you uplift it in a different way than you would do at other points in the year. And so that's what we really and truly do. We have some great programming coming up this year, or this month. We have a sewing circle with Sisters and Stitches, I want to say is their name. Uh, it's an African American sewing circle, so you can come and join and make your own quilting block.
Oh,
We will have yoga at the museum. And then we are always enhancing our programming. So we have our book talks throughout the year. Our Juneteenth celebration has grown year to year. I'm really excited about in June, we will have a new exhibition called Black Voices of the American Revolution,
oh,
where we're
wow.
going to examine what would motivate a person in New England, a Black person in New England, to either support the Patriots or support the Loyalists. And that's a very complex decision, but it's been oversimplified over the years. The other thing is, you hear a lot of people talk about America 250, which is 2026, and they think that they know what that's about. It's about John Hancock and John Adams, and that the African American community drew inspiration from them. I would want to argue, and this is what we're going to really venture into, is that perhaps because this was a very globally mobile community, many people were sailors and they traveled. What if they were exposed to these ideas? And that they're exchanging these ideas on equal footing. How would that change our understanding of this transformative moment that creates the country that we know today? It's just even asking those questions that's incredibly exciting for us. But most immediately, I would have to say, check out our Black History programs. And then we have our own goal this year for Black History Month, which
Okay.
is we want to raise $28,000 in 28 days.
Oh,
And so
that-
$1,000 a day for Black History Month. It's not the only way for us to do that, but it's part of our larger
yeah.
campaign called Know History, Share History, Protect it.
Mm,
So we believe that once you come to us and you know the history, you get excited about it, and then we want you to share it. We want you to bring people to the museum, support the programs, and then help us protect it because we operate historical buildings. And it was never a guarantee that these buildings would be where they are today. And so we need the support to make sure that we protect not only the buildings, but the stories of the communities that created those buildings. It's not just about the Frederick Douglasses of the world or the Mariah Stewarts or even the William Lloyd Garrisons. It's about the average person who had very little disposable time and very little disposable money. But they dedicated themselves to coming to the meeting house, to participating in the movement for freedom, a liberation movement for a future they would not see. And so we hope that people will join us in that journey and allow us to continue that work.
100%. Dr. Trent, thank you so much
Oh,
for all
thank
this
you.
fabulous information. I love what you're doing. And also your background is quite fascinating as well. I did look at your long history with museums and historical preservation organizations. And I'm like, wow. So you have a wealth of knowledge. So I hope folks can connect with you as well. But can you just tell us the platforms that the museum is on so that we can go to the website, go to the donation page, and if you're on
Mhm.
Instagram, so on and so forth. So how can we find you?
So you can find us on our website, which is maah.org. We're also on LinkedIn, Museum of, I think it's MAAH Museum. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as well. So we encourage you to find us on all of those. Check out our social channels for more updates. We got some great things happening this year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Trent.
Thank you.